Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some things just stick in your brain and others vanish into thin air? Well, today we're diving into something called wakeful rest, and how it might be the secret sauce for better memory. So imagine this: you've just learned something new, maybe for a test, a new skill, or even just a funny story. What you do right after learning it can make a huge difference in whether you remember it later. This is where the idea of wakeful rest comes in. It sounds simple, right? Just do nothing for a bit. But scientists have been digging into whether this quiet time is actually helping our brains lock in new information. The big question is, when and how does this simple act of resting actually boost our memory? Think of your brain like a computer. When you are learning something, it is like opening a new file. But that file isn't fully saved and organized until some background process finishes up. This process is called memory consolidation. The researchers here wanted to see if simply taking a break, not doing anything demanding, after learning something new, helps this consolidation process better than doing something mentally active. Here's the basic idea of how these studies usually work. First, you learn some information. Then, maybe they test you right away to see what you remember. The key part is what happens next. In some groups, people are told to just relax, sit quietly, and let their minds wander a bit. This is the wakeful rest group. In other groups, people are given a task to do, something that requires them to think or pay attention. This is the comparator group. After this break or activity, everyone is tested again to see how well they remember the original information. The researchers here wanted to get a bigger picture. Instead of just one study, they gathered information from many studies on this topic. This is called a meta-analysis. They looked at over 50 studies involving thousands of people to see what the overall trend was. And what did they find? Drumroll, please. Taking a short break of wakeful rest after learning something new does actually help memory. They found a significant positive effect, meaning people in the rest group remembered things better than those who did an activity. This is a solid finding, suggesting that this simple strategy isn't just a nice idea, it has real impact. But it wasn't the same for everyone. The researchers found that who you are and what you are trying to remember matters. For example, they saw a bigger boost from wakeful rest in older adults and in people with memory problems compared to younger, healthy adults. This suggests that when our memory system is already working a bit harder or has some challenges, that quiet time can be even more beneficial. They also found that what you do during the active comparator time makes a difference. If the active task was really demanding on your memory, like doing a complex learning task, the benefit of taking a rest instead was larger. But if the active task was something like playing video games or just simple attention tasks, the difference wasn't as big. This hints that the wakeful rest effect is strongest when it is contrasted with something that really taxes our memory system. Interestingly, the type of memory test also played a role. They found that wakeful rest seemed to help more with tasks that required you to recall information freely, like remembering a list of words, compared to tasks where you just had to recognize something, like picking the correct word from a list. So, why does this happen? The researchers discuss a couple of main ideas. One is trace consolidation. This is the idea that during rest, your brain is actively strengthening the neural connections related to what you just learned. It is like those background processes I mentioned earlier, making the memory trace more stable and easier to access later. Think of it as letting the newly formed memories set properly. The other idea is reduced trace competition. In a busy world, we're constantly taking in new information. If you learn something and then immediately learn something else that is similar, it can get all mixed up. This is like having too many files trying to use the same space on your computer. Wakeful rest, by not introducing new information, might be preventing these competing memories from interfering with each other, making the original memory clearer and easier to find. The study also touched on some other interesting points. For instance, it seems like the duration of the rest period wasn't as crucial as what that rest replaced. Even short bursts of rest seemed to be effective, especially if they were compared to a demanding task. This fits with the idea that the most critical period for preventing interference is right after learning. Now, like any research, this study has its limitations. One interesting point is what they call small study bias. This means that smaller studies, especially earlier ones, might have sometimes shown bigger effects. This can happen for various reasons, including just plain chance or maybe a focus on more striking results in those initial explorations. The researchers also mentioned that many of the studies they analyzed didn't have a lot of participants, meaning they might not have had enough statistical power to detect smaller effects reliably. However, the overall finding is still pretty robust. Wakeful rest is a beneficial strategy for memory. The fact that it helps people with memory impairments and older adults even more is particularly important. It suggests that this isn't just about optimizing perfect memory, but about providing a supportive environment for memory processes that might be struggling. So what does this mean for us? It is pretty straightforward advice. When you are learning something important, try not to immediately dive into another demanding task. Give yourself a few minutes of quiet time. Don't stare at your phone. Don't try to solve a complex problem. Just let your mind be still. This simple act could significantly improve your ability to remember what you've learned. It is a reminder that sometimes doing less can actually help you achieve more. It is fascinating to think about how our brains work and how we can optimize our learning and memory. This research offers a simple, accessible strategy that many of us can incorporate into our daily lives. And that is a wrap for this episode of RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this interesting, please give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more insights into the amazing world of psychology. See you next time.